All right, Beyonders, welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. This is the winning Warcry episode. We are excited to have you here. We're even more excited, though, to have Dan Herrera back in the studio with us. Dan, welcome back.
It's great to be here. I'm excited. Too long
I'm,
a break. Even one show off is too long a break.
that's right. You look a little more rested, though, although you might be drinking a monster right there.
No, I'm not. Can you imagine? For people who don't know, we record this at 9 o'clock my time, 10 o'clock yours, so that'd be insane. No, I've got a blinding light show from War Pigs Brewing.
Okay. Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Lubricate the tongue a little bit so that you're all
Yep.
ready to go for tonight.
Hmm.
So, yeah, we got a great show ahead here. We're going to be talking about Fyreslayers today, which is awesome because I don't know that I've ever really looked at their factions because I don't have any Fyreslayers. So,
Right.
I
Nobody
was,
does.
I know, right? So it was fun
Yeah.
to kind of go through it, and we're excited to walk through it with you guys. We got some news coming up, and today for our main topic, we're going to be talking about proxying and how to do it right. So, to kick us off, though, Dan, how is your hobby table doing?
Pretty good. I've been hobbying less lately. But since it's been 2 months, I've done a few things. I painted up a little mega boss
Oh,
here.
nice. Yeah.
Um, so he's fun. He's my friend. And then I've been learning a little bit of MDF terrain, and so I got this little like water wheel piece that kind of went together pretty easy. And well, easy. I mean, it took an evening, but not bad. Painting it is tough, because the MDF just like drinks the paint up, and if you try too hard, you can just warp it. So what I've been
Yeah.
finding is I just go with the natural, like it's got they kind of burn stars in the paint. So I just kind of faded the natural stars that they did, and then just put some ink washes over it. So it stays kind of brown everywhere, but if you just kind of embrace it, like you can kind of this little section can kind of feel like bricks a little. And the the size, at least for this one, is like perfect for
Oh, that's awesome.
minis, you know.
Yeah.
It's 3 inches from here to here, so it works for Warcry. I'm really happy with it. So I got another set as well that I'll probably use, and that's 2 tables of terrain for a lot cheaper than GW prices. I know some people love having, plastic terrain that's sculpted the same sort of quality as your plastic models are. I get that, but it's not a big step down in quality, and it's a whole lot cheaper, and it's big. You get big stuff with it, which is really great.
Yeah, I think there's almost like tiers, right? There's like your your typical GW level plastic mold injected terrain that you get. And then like maybe a step below that, it's like your 3D printed terrain. Like you can kind of see the line sometimes, but not a big deal, right? And then below that, I think is what you have right there, that MDM terrain that is wood, and it's a little bit thicker, so it's a little bit more sturdy. It still gives off what it is. And then the ones below that are those like cardboard pop-ups that like can't
Yeah,
barely
yeah,
hold a little model on top of them, right? They're just meant to be like a container,
yeah,
like or a box. Don't stand on top of the box,
yeah,
So, but I think as long as you're not throwing the little cardboard things up there, like have a great game, And like you said,
yeah,
that one that you have right there, that little water wheel mill looking thing, it looks great. It's big enough that you can have an epic battle at the mill,
yeah.
and it
That's
looks a
one
lot of fun.
issue I sometimes have with GW terrain is, I mean, Red Harvest is great for this, but a lot of them you can't really have a battle on top, right?
Right.
But
Yes.
this one, you've got multiple areas where you could have a battle. You could fit,
Hmm.
here's the size of a mega boss here, right? You can fit lots of people to fight the boss. And then you can fit 2 Stormcast fighting each other on the roof, you know?
Oh
So
yeah, definitely.
works great. So I'm excited to get some games in with this. It'll be fun.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, I am working on painting the Sundered Fate and Nightmare Quest um, uh, terrain that I have that's been waiting for me. And I need to get it painted for the Nova Open for my tables. So the airbrush has been whipped out and it is doing its work as it should,
Yep.
right? So to get it done, I am happy to say that Andy, he is one of our Discord members and Patreon members as well. He is working on some tables for the Nova Open. And
Cool.
let me see if you can send, if I can show some pictures.
Oh, right, because you have like double the people you had last year, right? So
We
you
have
all of a sudden
32 people.
more
32
than
people
double,
signed up.
more than
Yeah,
double.
we had
Wow,
14 last year.
that's
So
incredible.
yeah, so Andy is here, let me see if I can share this real quick. So he made this terrain table. You can
Oh,
see in the
that's so
video.
cool. Yep, I love that.
Yeah, and he we partnered with a 3D printed terrain company from England. Their name escapes me right now, but I'll post a link to them. Um,
Is it
Dark
Dark
Fantastic
Fantastic
Mills.
Mills? Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So you can see it right there. But Dark Fantastic Mills, and they're sending us some pre-printed stuff over
Oh my
from
gosh.
England that he's going to be putting on these tables, and it's just going to look amazing. So he's pretty much done with this grassy land with this stream in it. We're going to put the terrain on it, right? Some ruined castles, which I think
Yep.
will look just absolutely ridiculously amazing. And then this is some terrain that he's got that he's going to be putting there.
Oh,
But
that's
this
cool.
is um, his rocky kind of plateauish area that he's building with the
Wow.
foam, and
I'm
those
really
are all
impressed.
like 1 inch tall areas right there, that
Yep.
you can climb up on top of. And so
Cool.
you got a lot of open, but you got a lot of areas where you can move, and we can put like bridges across like those areas and stuff.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, so I'm really excited. And you know what the best part is? I believe that we are giving 2 of these boards away at Nova.
Oh, wow. That's
Yep.
amazing.
So 2 out of the one, everybody has a 1 in 16 chance of winning one of these boards. So
Incredible.
it's pretty awesome. Andy's super nice about it. I'm like, dude, are you sure you don't want to keep it for like the next year? He's like, yeah, it'll just take up space in my house. He's like, I
Yeah, he
want
just
one for
wants to make
me, and
more.
yeah, exactly. He's like, I want one for me and I want for my game store, and the other 2 we can just give away, and I'll make more next year.
Wow.
So yeah, so
Cool.
super appreciative of him, and we're just getting really excited for Nova. So
Yeah.
um, you know,
Well, thank you, Light Ninja. That's sweet. That's so cool.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, but that's what's on the hobby table. So let's talk about the news, huh?
Yeah, quite a bit of it.
So yeah, there's actually quite a few that came through since the last time we do, which is usually happens. We talk, and then like a week later we get stuff
Yeah, of course.
showing up. So
It's our curse.
um exactly. All right. So the first thing that I want to talk about is this White Dwarf issue 491. It's the one that's going to be coming out, I think, in about a week or something like that.
Yep.
It's got a bunch of Tau stuff, bunch of Underworld stuff, yada yada yada. But here we go. Might and Madness. This is for specifically the Quester Soulsworn and Royal Beastlayers. It looks like they will be getting new kind of narrative rules similar to what Idoneth Deepkin and Gloomspike gets got.
Cool.
It says right here, discussions about how lore impacts rules, continuing coverage of the latest Tale of the Four Warlords. Oh no, sorry, that's that's the wrong one. Right here, this is what it is. They're undertaking quests in their own particular way. One group are hunting down malignant threats and foul beasts, while the other are Stormcast Eternals. Duh, right? Both warbands. There's a lot of let's see. White Dwarf brings
Lore
lots of
quest.
delicious,
Yeah.
lore quests, artifacts, and campaign rules, which are supported by cards that come free with the issue. So,
Campaign rules is a big deal. I really encourage everybody, if you play a faction that's gotten some campaign rules, sorry, um, man, go test them out because I really think the third edition is going to have all of these campaign rules are going to be baked into third edition. I
yeah,
I know it's a tinfoil hat kind of thing to be saying, but the way they've been rolling these out in White Dwarf, I really think it's going to happen. So I encourage everyone to play test these, give them your honest reactions, what they're like to play with, because I think that this is going to be our allegiance abilities in third edition.
So let me ask you: do you think that that's just going to be for narrative or match play as well?
That's a great question. I have no idea. I mean, I'd be
Hmm.
fine with it either way. Like if they gave every single faction its own narrative allegiance abilities and said match play didn't have it, that'd be fine. Um, but man, it just feels like a shame to give narrative so much more to,
Hmm.
to do than match play, right? So I mean, you've got to bring something fun into match play. So I don't know if it would be this or something else. Who knows? But um, I think that people should at least be prepared for it to be in match play and to maybe give them feedback as if it were going to be in match play.
Yeah, I think like we rolled pretty well with the reactions in terms of the community. You know what I mean? Like everybody was generally pretty positive about it. Even the people that were like, like they didn't really have to use them per se, right? So it didn't really
Yep.
affect them. And I think that the Warcry community adapted to this change better than some of the changes that you see rolled out in 40K or AOS or something like that. So I'll
Yeah.
be interested to see if they go with something kind of big like allegiance abilities or faction abilities. That like maybe it's a once per battle thing, maybe it's a once per game thing. I don't know.
They
It'll be
usually
interesting.
go big. I mean, every every game of GWs that I follow that I've watched an edition change, they've gone pretty big. They've at least
Yeah.
changed one major thing that changes how the
Hmm.
game plays every time. So I would assume we at least get one, potentially two or three major things that change. So who knows?
Who knows? I'm excited. Keep your tinfoil hat on real quick. When do you think that 3.0 drops?
Uh, 2 years from now. So
Okay.
a while, but yeah, I do think it'll happen. I know a lot of one of the really funny things about Warcraft players who are too online is there's like a pretty decent sized group who are just like all in on the theory that GW is trying to sunset Warcry. Um, and like despite all evidence to the contrary. So yes,
Right.
I do think we will have a third edition, and I think it will be in 2 years.
I agree with you, and this is just based on the release schedule because AOS is coming out next year.
Yep.
Like it's confirmed, right? Like AOS 4.0 is coming out next year, and like GW has been very transparent about their release schedules, right? Like it's
Yep.
40K, Age of Sigmar, then there's some of their box games. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
That includes like Kill Team, Warcry, like all that stuff, right? And so they've got a 4 year like time frame, or maybe it's even 3 year time frame, but that they just keep rolling through. And it's funny that the Warcry players who are convinced that like they're trying to sunset it, it's happening in the season of 40K. I mean, GW is just going to be all about 40K right now. Arguably
Right.
their largest, I mean, it is their largest game that they have. So, it's like, oh, why aren't we being shown the love? We're being shown the door. It's like, well, no, it's because the biggest game has the biggest release,
And we're
So
still getting tons of warbands and all these box sets that we got the first year that we're not getting now. Not upset about that. I
right.
didn't really like the box sets anyway. I like the new warbands though, which we'll get to eventually. But yeah, I expect to see a third edition coming in right
Yeah.
on schedule. I doubt that they'll blow it out quite the way they did with second of giving us four versus boxes in the
Yeah.
first year. I thought that was crazy that they tried to do that. They definitely won't give us all that love for third edition, but
Right.
it's still going to come and it's still going to have at least one pretty crazy box.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Speaking of war bands, we talked about the Crew Boys war band last time, so you missed that discussion.
Yep.
But
I
what's your
listened
quick
to it.
take on
I
it? Do
didn't
you
miss
like
it.
them?
I
Oh, that's
liked
true.
him. Yeah, yeah. I thought they were too busy. I think someone mentioned it on your podcast, uh, that they were a little bit busy. Um,
Hmm.
man, and someone else talked about how if the previous box hadn't had a monkey-themed warband, I probably would have been more into a monkey-themed Cruel Boy warband. But
Yeah.
as is, it just didn't make sense to me. So that was too bad. I've got a lot of Cruel Boys stuff at home because I bought Dominion when AOS came out, and then uh, I won a Dominion box um, when I went to Adepticon, and so I have a lot of Cruel Boys. So
Yeah.
who knows? I might get them, I might not.
Yeah, I'll see. The problem is I've like decided that I'm a Warcry collector, so like, but the question is it's not a question of if I'll get it, it's when. Do I get it like when it's a year later and I don't have anything that I'm excited to buy and I'm like, oh sure, I'll pick it up. You know what I mean? But I already have the Dominion half of the Cruel Boys, so I've got that. Um, yeah. But what we do have is they revealed the Wilder Core Hunter pair, human and hound, to scout the mortal realm. So I guess they're called the Wilder Core, is what we're calling it, Wilder Core Hunters. And boy, oh boy, do we have a treat for you all. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. This came out and pretty much blew up the internet, like when we saw it, which I thought was interesting because this is so clearly a Warcry warband. Like it
Mm,
screams Warcry warband, and yet they touted it as an AOS release that you could then play in Warcry. I
yeah,
thought that
they
was
did.
an interesting marketing tactic right there because you look at it and you're like, the number of models that are in this thing are, is like a perfect warband. The models themselves look like Scream Warband, and the arrangement that they have up here is like very Warcry esque in terms of showing us a warband, and yet use it in your AOS games. Oh, and by the way, there might be some Warcry rule, or there will be some Warcry rules, which is usually the opposite. So that was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah. I think it's just this Cities of Sigmar release.
Yeah,
Everything everything I'm getting from Games Workshop on this makes me think that I think that Cities of Sigmar is the greatest thing to ever happen to the AOS setting. And I don't really personally feel that way, but I've been shocked at how many people do.
yeah.
So I think a lot of people are just really excited about Cities of Sigmar in AOS. And so maybe that's what it is. Maybe they're just trying to piggyback onto this whole big release all at once and kind of bring out this Warcry Warband at the same time. Because a lot of the Warcry Warbands have been pretty good in AOS. And so maybe as an AOS unit, maybe they know something we don't. Maybe this
Mhm.
Warcry Warband is actually really good in AOS and, you know, those dogs just have some broken like smell butt ability, and once you sniff a butt, all of your things get plus 12 rend against the
Right.
butt. Like, who knows, right? It
Yeah,
could
yeah,
be
yeah,
anything.
yeah, yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but I just wonder if that's kind of what's happening here.
Yeah, I will say though, as soon as I saw these guys, I said auto buy. It's an auto buy for me. Like I
Oh,
love
really?
these
Tell me
models.
more. Okay.
Oh, dude, I love these models so much. Like all of them. I love the hand crossbows that they have. Right, the pikes. I love the dogs. Like I love this little dude that's hanging out in his sock. You
Okay,
know,
that part is wild. I get it. I get it with that part, why you'd love it. Uh-huh.
and then there's this guy. Like
Yeah.
look at this guy. Like little
Mhm.
one-eyed little frog looking thing. Like but I love it, dude. I love like the kind of the cloak aesthetic that they have here. The leather cloak. They're almost like the witch hunters that I think that everybody's been hoping would come out as a war band for cities.
Yep.
So this is like the closest one that we're getting. Um, but I to me it's an auto buy. I love the model so much. Yeah, like the rules are
Okay.
probably terrible because they all have hand crossbows. You know what I mean? They're probably
Sure.
shooting like 8-inch range for like 1-3 damage at strength 3. But I don't care. Like they're gonna look amazing. So,
The hand crossbowman can get spears though. If you look at the
oh,
picture, there's
okay,
um there's sorry, not the main warband showcase picture, but the in the little picture. Maybe it
okay,
was one of the I don't know, maybe it's in the trailer, but there were shots of regular old guys with spears. I think
yeah,
some of them can't do it, like this guy holding two crossbows, like he's in
right,
Diablo 3. I doubt that you could model him with a spear, but some of the others, especially this one who's holding a crossbow with maybe top right, the one that's holding a crossbow with two hands, that guy could
right
easily
there,
be
yeah,
holding a spear. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So I don't know which ones will have alternate builds, but I think you can get some spears out of them, and that should make it a little bit better.
Yeah, but still, I mean, are we thinking skeleton spears? You know what I mean? So I don't
Yeah,
know.
fair enough.
Like,
Fair enough.
still though, it doesn't matter to me. The rules I already said this. The rules don't matter for me on this one because I love the warband so much that like I'll get it, and it's like the people who love the canine shadow stalkers. Like they're
Yep.
terrible rules wise, but people love the
Yeah.
models, right? So
And you've got 11 fighters in there. So,
yeah,
for objective missions, you'll be all right. And then you just got to figure out a plan for, certain other things.
yeah,
So it should be okay.
absolutely. The other thing that came out almost around the same time was we got a new FAQ update, and I pulled it up here. It was funny because I saw Off Meta Musings kind of complain about these sneaky updates, and I mean, I agree to him. Like, it's like you should kind of tell us that the FAQ is out, right? That you're updating
Yeah,
this.
for sure.
Um, but at the same time, like it was very minor as well, in my opinion. There was only like one major thing that happened. In terms of like the minor stuff, there's like terrain stuff, there's objective stuff, like how to arrange objectives and what constitutes where you put them and how you measure by them.
Yep.
And stuff that I feel like a lot of us have probably been playing anyway, but just a little bit of clarification. There was obviously a bunch of stuff for the Might and Madness like fact that came out, but nothing other than the first inch of the ruler that's in the Crypt of Blood is 3 millimeters too long. Nothing that would be shocking to the normal person. Yet another
Uh,
reason, Dan, not to get the Crypt of Blood box.
no one should get that box. That was hilarious okay, in our last podcast, for anyone who missed it, Justin, you were saying like, man, $80 is absurd. Like, there's no way you can charge people more than $80 for that set. It should
Yeah,
be less. And everyone else was like, I'm sorry, it's gonna be at least $80. But no one knew how much it would come in at. Anyway, that just is so funny to me. Let's get
yeah,
into the real meat of this FAQ though.
yeah. So the real one is page 70, universal abilities. Change the rampage ability to read. This fighter can make a bonus move action up to a number of inches equal to the value of this ability. Then they can make a bonus attack action. So it actually clarifies two things here that's not in the rule. Rampage says a fighter can make a bonus attack action or a bonus move action and an attack action. It actually doesn't say then in the rules, right? And so there was always that question, and I know this because I got this as a TO all the time, which was, well, do I have to move and then make an attack, or do I not have to move and I can just attack? So this one is saying you make the bonus move, then you attack. So you kind of need to
You
move and
must
attack.
make the move. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So that's the first one. The second one, obviously, the big one is instead of just getting a straight bonus move, you get the value of the dice as the bonus move as well. So I saw your video about this, Dan, and you were spot on about this. This is a boon for some models, and this is a bane for some others, right? Which I
Yeah.
think is great in my opinion. I think it's
Okay.
I think it's really great. Like we're going to be talking about Fyreslayers today, who have on average a 3 movement, right? And
Yep.
so this rampage could actually be a real boon for them if you get a high quad, right?
Yeah,
So
and a lot of people complain about move 3 fighters kind of taking over the meta, but that's cheap move 3 fighters. And what you see from those move 3 factions is they bring a lot of their really cheap stuff, but then you never see more than one in-faction hero from those. They're always bringing in other faster heroes because once you get past about 120 points, move 3 stops being sort of the bee's knees. You actually start wanting a little bit of speed to get your sort of beef into position.
Hmm.
And so that can be kind of nice. You might start seeing things like more Annihilator Primes or more Lords of Plagues, things like that.
Yep.
That could be kind of cool.
Yeah, I think so. And it was always tough when, I mean, like, and I'm guilty of this. At Gen Con, I was playing the oh, what was that mission's name where you had to prevent them from getting from one side of the board to the other?
Oh, there are two Red Rover missions. I can't remember what they're
Yeah.
called.
So I
Yeah.
was playing the Spider Swarm when it was really good still, right?
Hmm.
And I had my Stormcast with the protectors, and I had a prosecutor. Now I used Rampage in there, which gave him a nice bonus move, right? Like a really nice bonus move that was able to get him from like one spider to another spider to another spider, basically. You know what I mean? To do what he needed to do. But uh, you wouldn't be able to get that because I mean he moves 8, right? So the best that you'll be able to
Right.
do with him now is a 6. So I think that's I don't have any heartburn about this. I really don't. I think this is probably the best change that GW could have made to Rampage without totally nerfing it. Like I don't think it's totally
Yeah.
nerfed here. You know,
Hmm.
um, I, I don't
The
think it's
only other
totally
thing
nerfed. Yeah, go
mhm.
ahead.
I the only thing I can think of is if you'd gotten like -1 crit damage on the attack or like -1, but that just would not have been nearly as elegant from a wording perspective.
Right,
So this
right.
is a much more elegant solution that it helped because of that rampage being too strong compared to other quads issue. And I'm excited to see this play out. I've only played one game with this new rule where I actually rolled a quad. Uh, so I played two games since the rule came out. Only rolled a quad in one of them, and it was quad fives, so it didn't really change anything. But that's okay, right? Um,
Yeah,
Sometimes it's going to be the same as it was before, and sometimes it's going to be a little different. So that's cool.
yeah, and the Varangard are crying in their sad little chaosy helmets, and
Yep.
our RIP to their rampage. But I mean, how many times, even just on this show, have we said, "Is this better than Rampage? Is this better than
So many
Rampage?"
times.
But
Yeah.
now I think that we do have to actually look at it and say, "Well, is this better than Rampage?" Because for a move 5 fighter or something like that, it may not be. Like
Yep.
or their quad, their faction quad may be better for them. You know,
And Varanguard specifically, I think are going to be fine
yeah.
because they have a build your own rampage in Slaves to Darkness on a triple.
Hmm.
If you get a kill, you get to rampage, which Varanguard get kills pretty well. So you can, if you start in combat, say double attack something, kill it, and then you get to rampage. They just won't be able to like start in the middle of nowhere and do that rampage where you move like
Right.
3 moves in a row and go 30 inches across the board. They might have to
Yeah.
settle for 24 instead, and that's probably a good thing. Let's be real. So,
It's
um,
not
yeah,
probably a good thing. It is a good thing.
yeah,
Yeah. So, but that was the fact. If you guys have other questions about what's in there, go ahead and check it out. I'll put a link in the description for you. But again, there's just a lot of stuff about terrain and how to set it up and objectives and stuff like that. It's good to know, especially if you're the one that likes to set up the boards. About how you should be arranging things, but it's probably not worth spending like too much time on it here to talk about it. But definitely go check it out. Yeah, but that's kind of the news that we had. It was eventful. We had had a warband that came out. We had a fact that dropped on us, and of course we've got like the White Dwarf stuff. So we're having this trickle effect coming out, and like we said, it's sort of in the shadow of the big 40K release. But I'm okay with that. Like I got a lot of painting to catch up on anyway, and
Yeah.
like and honestly, I do not want to see any kind of Warcry release happen within the next 2 weeks, because then that could change how Nova operates. So
That would be a
just
nightmare for you.
oh yeah, just wait until Nova to release it, GW. Okay, I know you're listening. I know you guys really love this podcast, and we appreciate you listening to it. So just hold off until the Nova Open, and then you'll get all the buzz from everybody that's there. So awesome. Well, that brings us to our faction focus today, which is the Fyreslayers. So I have pulled up warcrier.net here, which again, a big shout out to our friend who runs it over there. Thank you for putting this up. It is a great resource just to check things. And with the free rules online, sometimes it's hard to pull open those PDFs. They're so large and bulky sometimes. Having these resources here on the website just to be able to go through is really helpful. So thank you. So let's talk about Fyreslayers. I am going to be honest, Dan. I have never seen a Fyreslayers warband on the table. Have you?
I have seen a cow warband using Fyreslayers rules, but I have never seen actual Fyreslayers on the table. So I have played against Fyreslayers, but it was like a fully built out sort of cow Warcry warband, but then he was just using Fyreslayers rules to do everything. So
Nice.
I sort of played against them, I guess. Only sort of.
Yeah, I have never seen them. I've always been curious, though. I don't know what it is. I think I'm drawn to these half naked, dwarves, or whatever, with their gold or their that they have. But let's start with their abilities. They've got 2 reactions, one for the heroes and one for the regular fighters. The fighter is a very familiar one. You see this in a lot of war bands, right? Which is when an enemy fighter finishes their move within 3 inches of you, another guy can come over and assist. Basically, they got to end within 1 inch of that. So that helps. Like if you've got little chaff, obviously, you can bring over a big boy to come and assist you in that fight. So yeah,
I and a lot of other folks really hyped up these types of reactions because they can be so powerful in certain situations. But I think generally they're not as good as the reactions that are useful in more situations. Do you know what I mean? Where
yes,
there's when you do this, when you take a 65 or a 70-point fighter and you trade one of their actions for the action of a 200-point fighter, it's so good. You feel incredible about it. But man, is it hard to set that up. Your opponent, if you're being courteous, you at least tell your opponent that you have this reaction, right?
yeah.
I think we need to do a lot of work in the Warcry community about how you communicate your faction's rules before a game. That's a whole separate conversation. But
Ooh.
your opponent can do a lot to prevent you from really getting the most out of this reaction. And so, yeah, I used to think before I had done a ton of reacting, I used to think that these types of reactions were the best reactions they printed. And now I think they're just okay. I think it's okay. It's not amazing. But keep your eye out for it when you're playing Fyreslayers, because when you do get to do it, it will feel amazing. But you'll only get to do it and really get real value out of it like once or twice per tournament.
So you say that, and I think 80% of the time I totally agree with you. It's hard to set up. It's hard to really make a good use of it. It's very situational. As I have gone through the Fyreslayers like abilities and their fighters, they're they are a warband that wants to fight in groups. They don't want to stray too far from each other. It's almost like they kind of want to build a shield wall, and that'll become clear as we go through some more of the other abilities, because they have a lot of AOE bubble like buffs. That, like, if you're within 6 inches or 12 inches, or I mean, not 12 inches, like 6 inches or 3 inches, that you get buffs to toughness, strength, damage, like all those types of things. And so they kind of want to play, like, if you're really maximizing your abilities, they want to play kind of close together. So I could see how this reaction actually benefits this faction a little bit more than the orc one. Because the orc one, you kind of want to send your big boys out and let them go do their damage. And they're rarely within each other's way to do the get stuck in. So I think you may see it more with these Fyreslayers than you would with the orcs, in my opinion. So
One issue there is that sometimes the mission dictates to you how you're gonna set up,
sure.
which can be a little bit tough for that kind of play style. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's certainly not terrible. I agree with you. I mean, it's certainly if you can set it up, it does well. Maybe that's one of the keys if you're gonna play Fire Slayers is try as hard as you can to put your opponent in positions where they can't avoid playing into it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this, like, objectives, like they would really shine here. You know what I mean? Like, if you can get guys near objectives and have enemies
Well,
coming
but
on you.
the tough thing is you have to be at the objective first, right? Because if they
Sure.
beat you
Yeah,
to the objective,
that's a great point.
then no enemy fighter is finishing a move action,
Yeah, that's
visible
a
to
great
you and
point.
within three. You
Yep.
are finishing move actions next to them. So I don't know. It depends on the situation.
Yeah. Now the hero reaction, I'm less impressed with. I mean,
And it's
it may
only
make
one
it.
hero too.
It's only
It's
one hero. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, and he makes it's when a friendly fighter is taken down, again, super situational, and until the end of the battle round, you get to add one to the damage points from your hits and critical hits from melee attack actions, which is fine for, I mean, most fire slayers are melee anyway, that are within 6 inches of fire. So in theory, there's a 12-inch bubble, which is a good chunk of the map, but um, yeah, I don't know, like, I'm kind of super meh about that reaction.
Same page. And let's just scroll down to the hero who has this ability because
Yeah.
I don't think that this hero is good enough.
It's the Auric
Um,
Flamekeeper. I think he's
right.
terrible.
So you do get a lot of wounds for 105 points, but man, that attack profile is not what you want. And basically, you are sitting around with him, not attacking, hoping that they trigger this. And then this, by that point, right? A lot of your fighters have gone, you've
Right.
lost a fighter, so your ability to actually have this activate in an AoE is very low. You're giving up an action to do it, so you're not attacking, basically. So what are the odds that that buff is worth more damage than, yeah, he has a crappy attack, 3414, but what are the
Yeah.
odds that that buff is going to do more for you than another attack would do? I think very low.
Oh, super low. And the only time I can honestly say that it may happen is like an alpha strike from your opponent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, that's
where
fair.
you're maximizing, like, yeah, they get an alpha strike and boom, they kill somebody right near you. You're able to pop this objective or this ability, and then most of your guys still have that buff. But, like, when does
And
that happen?
with the change to Rampage, that happens way less.
Yeah,
Because that
exactly.
used to be what like the only reason you would bring 10-inch move fighters is for the chance to alpha strike. And in a 4 round
Yep.
tournament, you get to alpha strike someone once in 4 rounds and you win the turn that you do that. So but now you can't do it. So what's
Right.
the point? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So what I do like about the Fyreslayers is they have a lot of doubles that aren't bad. The first one, the Fire Steel Throwing Axe, I don't love these. Right, it's roll a number of dice on a 4 or 5, you get a 1. On a 6, you get a 2, and it's within 6 inches of this fighter. So like super situational. If a fighter has 1 or 2 wounds, maybe you try it, but like, and it's universal, so like all of them could do it. But I mean, this is one of those that I would ignore if I'm like, planning to play the faction.
I
Um,
can't
I
imagine using anything other than Relentless Zeal most of the time, right? +3
right,
move seems great, and on just a double, I would probably use that over
a
this
lot.
anytime.
I would be
Yeah,
using that a lot with this with this
sure,
warband.
sure.
Um,
Uh-huh.
the encase in molten rock is actually not bad from the standpoint that um, it anytime that the fighter makes an attack action in this activation, subtract half the value of their ability moving up or the move characteristic move rounding up, right, to a minimum of 1 until the end of the
Yep,
battering round. So it's like a half net. Now it says attack action, so you think, oh crap, I gotta like be right next to him. Actually, the fighter, the hero that is on, and it's a fighter and a hero. They actually have a ranged attack 3 to 15 inches.
yep.
Now I don't think that this hero is good. I would not take this hero. Like I don't like their attack profile at all.
Right. It's awful.
With this. But there is the I'm trying to scroll down here. Hold on, it's getting hung up a little bit. There is a fighter down here that is basically the Ara Karthgard. Again, not great profile, but he's 115 now. But if you really wanted to control movement, a 15-inch yeet, like boom, and by the way, it's after the attack action, not a successful attack. So you could
Yeah, you can
miss
miss. Mhm.
and they're still halved. So I think it's interesting to think about putting one of these in your army if you want to maybe control some movement from like some big rat ogres or Varangard or something like that. That they're planning
Yep.
on making a move because 15 inches is pretty far. That's if he's in the middle, he can touch pretty much anywhere on the board that he can see. You know, so
Yeah, and after a move, you're looking at 18 inches as far as where you can threaten this
mhm.
ability. You can kind of pin an important fighter in their deployment zone. I'm okay with that. If someone included a Hearthguard in their warband, I wouldn't tell them that they were crazy.
Yeah.
But man, it's you're not doing a lot of damage, right? So I would never take more than one. But I could see taking one. You could convince me.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I was thinking about that earlier, and I'm like, I wonder if Dan's going to be saying I'm crazy on this. So,
I don't think you're crazy
um,
to take one. I think in general, cheap archers are not where you want to be
right.
in this game. Uh, Shooters, as they get more expensive, get more usable, but in general, you know, people have had so much trouble with shooting in
Yeah,
this, like trying to play a ton of shooting outside of KO in this game. And I think that those guys are generally the same, but just bringing one for the ability to be able to like pin a fighter down in the corner where it can't score any points, I could see that being very useful. Mhm.
yeah. The first triple that they have here, duty unto
This is
death.
the big one.
I like this one a lot, right? So if they have 5 or more damage points allocated to them, the fighter makes a bonus move action, then they can make a bonus attack action. So you're talking about rampage right here for
Yep,
triple,
on a
essentially, right?
triple. Mhm.
Yeah, so that's great, and the odds of them having 5 points or more in damage, I think, is pretty high. Like, because they want to get stuck in on melee and do some of that stuff. So, what a great way to kind of get them around. So they can bypass that quad, that need for the quad.
And this is a lot nicer on the bigger fighters, but you do
Hmm.
get those 140 point heroes that we'll talk about a little bit later that can use this and can be pretty attractive with it. So this is a good one. This is a really great ability.
Now, the next triple that they have, the Sling Shield charge, this is your typical charge, right? Which is like you finish a move within 1 inch and you do the damage based on the value of the dice, right?
Yeah.
Um, Normally, I'm not in love with these because a lot of it you have to spend points on expensive cavalry. But with that said, this is actually on your cheap fighters, right? And so
Yep.
you've got your 65 point models that have these little shields, and they're probably not going to be doing a lot of damage anyway. But if you need them to get in there and do 5-6 points of damage because you can easily make a triple with a wild dice, all of a sudden, like, this ability, I think becomes it's situational, but I think it's easily situational. Like, you can easily find a
Yeah.
situation where you would use it more than maybe
I
your
agree with
cavalry.
that. I think you won't use it every game, but you'll be happy with it when you do, and that's cool.
Yeah. All right, so now we're getting down to the quad. Is this better than Rampage? The Unleashed Runic Fury. What do you think, Dan?
Um, so no. I mean, so here's the thing, right? If you are, there's a few of these fighters where if you're adding 5 or 6 attacks to their attacks characteristic, that can be okay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so for example, some of these Carls, the Flame Strike Pole Axe, maybe 2/5 getting 10 attacks on that. That could be good. I mean, that could be worth doing over a rampage. But in general, the the profiles on these Fyreslayer heroes, each individual attack is not that special. Fyreslayer
Yeah.
heroes are kind of in this awkward place where they all cost in between 150 and 100. So there's no real like heavy hitter who I'm really excited to use a quad on. Um, getting plus, you know, +3 attack on most of these Fyreslayer heroes is not anything to write home about, where I'd rather just bring in an ally and use my dice on that ally for most of these
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah, I mean, here's the nice thing, right? Like, the nice thing is that you've got a choice, right? Let's say I roll quad fives, or I roll triple fives, and I make turn that into a quad. I could choose to use that as a rampage, or I could add 5 attacks to somebody who is stuck in with another person. I've got some flexibility there. I could
Yeah.
see it where you would want to um, use that. You'd want to use that in a certain situation or not. So, yeah, I mean, like, I think that the rampage before was an auto include, and now, like, with this one, I'm kind of like, I could see situations where I would use it, definitely. So I don't know that it's better, right? But I definitely it's an option, which I
The
think some
fact that
other
it works,
factions. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the fact that it works on both attacks is nice. So if you're
Yeah,
on quad fives, you're getting +10 attack. That's pretty good. That can let one of your Fyreslayer heroes actually go toe to toe with something that costs 250, and
yeah,
that can be kind of nice. Uh, yeah, can you rely on it? It's tough. I think with the nerf to Rampage, there will be times when you use this, and even, even pre-nerf, you could see some situations where you would use this. Um, it's not terrible. It's just I would never like plan for it, and I would
yeah.
never run into combat with something that was bigger than me, hoping that I get a quad the next round. You know what I mean?
That's
Um,
yeah.
and I think if I was playing against Fire Slayers, I would never choose not to engage out of fear of this quad. If it happens, it happens. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. So the hero abilities that we're going to talk about here, this is where I was sort of getting the impression that they like to clump up, right? This Volcano's Call, not a great ability. It works on one fighter that they have. It's one of those, choose something within 12 inches, roll the dice equal to the value of the ability. 4/5 is 1, and a 6 is 2. And I'm like, ugh, this is a terrible ability. Don't ever use that.
yeah.
So
And this runic empowerment and this log leader are also clump up, but they're both bad. Um,
yeah.
Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
you know, honor our oaths is bad. Anything that requires you to get a kill before you use it is not good on any fighter that costs less than 275 points. Because it's just too hard to get kills, right? On
Right.
really expensive fighters, it's super easy to get kills. So
Yeah.
you can use those abilities. But generally, if you have to get a kill to use it, it's not good if you have a
Yeah.
normal sized fighter.
Well, and look, the runic empowerment, right, which is you pick someone within 3 inches, and then they get to add the value to their strength characteristic.
Not
Okay,
good.
the problem is you have to take that fighter who is not good.
Yep.
We'll talk. Let's see that fighter is the Auric Rune Smiter. For 110 points, you get 3 attacks, strength 4, 1/4 damage. Like
Not
yikes!
usable.
I
Not usable.
no, no. So like even though that you're like okay, that might be okay to add the strength though. You could go toe to toe with like a Stormcast or something like that. Wait, no, I'm not actually going to include that model that can use that in my army. So
Right.
the Lodge Leader, that's your Auric Rune Father and Rune Son. Those
Not
guys are
usable.
traps, right? They
Yep.
they they make you think that they're actually not bad, but they're not that great. And this ability here, which is add 1 to the strength characteristic of melee actions while they're within 6 of this fighter. Again, like you have
It
to pop it at
includes
the
the word
beginning of the round and all that stuff. You know what I mean? So
it includes the word
yeah.
visible, which is a really great key to tell you not to use it. Uh, if if your ability says visible friendly fighters, your ability is not playable. So
Yeah.
yeah, you can't use Lodge Leader. Honor
Yeah.
Our Oaths, I said why you can't use it.
Yep.
Icon of Grimnir, um, add the toughness characteristic of friendly fighters within 3 inches. That's a pretty small bubble, and it's a
And
triple to
yeah,
boost the toughness. And the hero who has it is
the
not good. The
Battlesmith.
Battlesmith is not good.
No.
120 for 3424 is not good. Um,
Yeah, they're totally self-selecting here. You know what I mean? Like um
yeah,
now the Battle Fury until the end of this battle round, this is a quad. Add the value of this ability to the move characteristic of this fighter. In addition, this fighter makes a bonus move action, then they can make a bonus attack action. So for
better
that
than
fighter,
Rampage. Mhm.
yeah, for that fighter, it's better than Rampage, right?
Significantly
So
better. Mhm.
yeah,
And this is for
and
the Grimwrath Berserker, who we
yes,
can maybe talk about. Um, I think both you and I think that there are three fighters who are pretty clearly better than the Grimwrath, but you can play this. You could convince me to maybe a narrative where you can maybe um, boost the attack profile with some artifacts, things like that. Getting
yeah,
getting that quad, especially a narrative where you're going to play a lot of games with the same warband. You're going to get that quad eventually, right? In, you know, you do get a quad in 2/3 of games. And if you have a
right,
couple artifacts on this guy, then you're getting these like crazy super rampages. You could convince me to do that. Um,
yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
I would ever do it for match play.
I think he's an honorable mention, right?
Sure.
Like he's our honorable mention. So that brings us. So we're going to talk about the winners and losers of the Fyreslayers heroes. The problem with the Fyreslayers is that they have a hero problem. They've got like a billion heroes and only a
So
few
many.
fighters, you know. And so let's start with the winners.
Sure.
Who are like, and we both kind of came to the conclusion of three that we liked. And independently, we kind of messaged each other Discord, and we're like, "Oh yeah, those are the ones I like too." Right. So,
Yeah.
who are the three that you like?
I'll start. I'll start with it's because it's really two. Uh,
Okay.
so I'll start with the Doomseeker. The
Yeah.
Doomseeker is cool. 135 points for a 5 attacks, strength 4, 2/4 profile, and 20 wounds. So you can kind of think of the Doomseeker as just a little Stormcast guy. coming
Yeah.
around. He's a little bit more killable with 4 toughness instead of 5, but he's got more damage than a similar point Stormcast would have. Um, and so that's great. I think he can just be a really nice, self-sufficient, you know,
Mm.
boost his moves, get him into position, and then people are going to fear those 5 attacks. And 5 attack fighters, I'm generally skeptical of because of counter, unless their attacks do a ton. But he's only 135 points, right?
Yeah.
So, um, if you take a bunch of damage back from counter, that's okay. You probably dealt a bunch of damage as well, and then he did his job. If he kills 2 chaff fighters, he did his job. And I think he's
Yeah.
going to have a really easy time doing that. So I like the Doomseeker quite a bit.
I do too. I think that he's probably the best choice in the list in terms of, and it really is that 5 attacks. And I understand your hesitation with the counter because people are using that more and more as they see that like it's a great way to like let your chaff basically chip away it's something that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Yeah.
But he's also not a strength 3, so he's not going to be missing a lot either. I mean, strength 4 is the average, roughly. So
Yeah.
unless he's going against like toughness 5, like it probably the unless you get some horrible dice rolls, the counter's probably not going to do a ton against him for your chaff model. So yeah, I
That's a
like him a
great
lot.
point. Those
You
cheap
know,
those cheap fighters, they're not going to hurt him that bad on counter because of the strength 4, and then defensive fighters, they're not going to be reacting because they want to use their real attack. And so in
yeah,
that situation, you'll be really glad you have 5 attacks. So
right,
yeah, there's a lot
yep,
there's a lot of play with the Doomseeker. But you were also pretty excited about the Berserker cards, I think, and I think they're pretty good
yeah.
too. So do you want to
So
talk about
so
those?
Well, yeah, one thing I did want to mention about the Doomseeker is he only has the hero rune mark. But as we just went through all of those hero abilities, like it doesn't matter. Like it's okay. You know what I mean? Normally when you only see the hero rune mark, you're like, oh geez, like I'm really limiting myself here. But no, it's fine. Because he still has access to all of the great universal fighter abilities as well. The move, like all of those things. So
Yep.
that's not a feature, or that's not a bug, guys. That's a feature with the Fyreslayers is not having
Yeah.
extra heroic rune marks. So I do like the Hearthguard Berserker. And now you've got 2 options. You have the Broadaxe. So this is a Hearthguard Berserker Carl,
Mhm.
which means it's basically the leader of the Hearthguard Berserkers, right? You have one with the Berserker Broadaxe, and then you have one with the Flame Strike Poleaxe. They're exactly the same points, movement, toughness, wounds, everything like that. The only difference is that the Berserker with the Broadaxe, he is 2-inch profile, 4 attacks, 5 strength, 2/4 damage. The Poleaxe is 2 attacks, or sorry, 2 range, 4 attacks, 4 strength, so 1 less strength, to 5 damage, so 1 extra critical hit. I prefer in this situation the Berserker with a Broadaxe because I think that point of strength tips him more than that extra point of crit damage, in my opinion.
Yeah. Mhm.
So he can go up against some toughies at 5, and then he can find those chaff at 4 and really lay into them with 4 attacks, you know, and use that 2-inch range on that too, which is nothing to sneeze at with these guys. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think
yeah.
it's really only against toughness 6 where you'd rather have the poleaxe.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I think you're much happier with the broadaxe.
Yeah. The other one that I did like, and it was really just for points, is the Volkite Berserker Carl. Now, he has the same movement, toughness, and wounds as the Hearthguard Berserker Carl, but his attack profile is 4 attacks, strength 4, 2/4 damage. So he's very similar, actually, to the Flame Strike Poleaxe because he just doesn't have that 1 extra crit point, but he comes in at 110 points instead of 140.
Sure.
Right, so that saves you an extra 40 points. So I like him here. The thing that he doesn't have that the other 2 do, the other have the elite, or is that the warrior rune mark?
Yeah, it's the one that gives them a rampage on a triple. And for
Yeah.
me, that's the big reason to take those Carls
Yes.
is
Yeah.
once they've taken 5 points of damage, they are terrifying, which really forces your opponent to either avoid them or go all in on them.
Hmm.
And so that's a nice little constraint to put on your opponent because the second they take 5 damage, all of a sudden getting a rampage on a triple is just really good value. And so that can be pretty terrifying.
Yeah, but if you're struggling to find 30 points, don't pass up the Volkite Berserker Carl. In my opinion, I think he's a pretty good value at 110.
Yeah.
There as a leader, you know. Who are your losers in this list? I think we mentioned a couple
Oh
of them.
man, there's too many to talk about. I think the Battlesmith is
Yep.
pretty terrible. I think the Rune Father and the Rune Son get out of
Uh-huh.
here. I think the Rune Smiter and the Rune Master and the Flame.
Yep.
I mean, literally all of the fancy ones, all of the ones
Yeah.
you want to take, you can't
That's
take.
right. They're
I
no
mean,
good.
yeah, and it's like Fyreslayers has such a problem with having like memorable models because they just have a profile problem.
Yeah.
And oh man, all of the most memorable ones are really bad. The Flamekeeper is a cool model, unplayable. Um, and it's
Yeah.
a shame because I said I liked the Doomseeker. The Doomseeker is a hero, but of all the hero sculpts, I think that's my least favorite. So all
Right.
of the if you wanted a cool Fyreslayer hero that avoids the Fyreslayer problem, the reason that nobody plays Fyreslayers in Warcry, the fact that they all look the same. If you want a hero that doesn't look the same, too bad.
Yeah.
They're all terrible.
100%. So, um, yeah, exactly. And we're, you know, like I said earlier, I think the Rune Father and the Rune Son are a trap. You think, oh, they're only 140, 135 points, you know, but their profiles don't support it, their abilities don't support it. Look elsewhere. You know, I would rather
Yeah,
take two of those Volkite Carls than one of the Rune Father. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So, yeah, they're trapped. Now, fighters, you actually have a much more condensed area here, right? So it's important to recognize that the fact, and it says this at the top of this page here, the Volkite Berserker with Firesteel War Pick with Hand Axe has become the Firesteel weapon and bladed sling shield. So you're going to see two profiles, but they're
Your
really just
compendium.
one now. Yeah.
Yep,
So right here, these two, or I guess he just combined it into one, which is great. Okay,
yep.
so you've got a 70-point Volkite Berserker with a pair of Firesteel hand axes, and then you have a Firesteel weapon and bladed sling shield for 65 points. Between those two, which one do you like?
Um, I'll say first of all, I think they're both good, but I
Mhm.
would pick the toughness 5 one
Yes.
because having a 65-point fighter that can counter anything off the board is really, really good. It puts this crazy constraint on um, the average player that just can be really, really crazy for them. If I was playing a tournament and I had to play Fyreslayers, if I was playing a tournament that was more like an invitational, where I knew every player was going to be like highly, highly informed about the metagame,
Uh huh.
I would expect counter control to be less successful. I'd
Mhm.
expect more things like mega bosses or giant ogre heroes or ogrite
Yeah.
myrmidons or things that are not concerned with toughness 5. In that
Yeah.
situation, I would take the 70-point one with only
Mhm.
toughness 4, but with a very legitimate damage profile.
Yeah.
Um, but otherwise, I think you're better off just countering people off the board. Um, just getting into position, getting tons of counters, and just saving those 5 points, right? Because you're gonna have 6 of these guys. So
Yeah. Right. That's
saving
30
five
points.
points each time, 30 points, spend that on something else. It's gonna go great.
Yeah.
That's where I would go.
Yeah. And as we mentioned before with the abilities, these guys have that the 65 point guys have that shield charge, so that if you did need them to do some damage with a nice triple, they could, you know. So
And coming out of
it's
a
an
cheap
option.
guy, that's okay, right? Because
Yeah.
normally abilities are not as good on your cheap fighters because your cheap fighters do so much less damage with those abilities. Here, that's
Yep.
not true.
Exactly. Exactly. Now here we're getting to what I think is the meat of this warband, and it's the Hearthguard Berserkers. We talked about how much we love the Carls. I think that these Berserkers, while they're starting to get into that mid-range fighter point wise and ability wise, I think that they're actually really good. They both have 2-inch range, 3 attacks. Again, the broad axe has strength 5, 2, 4 damage. The pole axe has strength 4, 2, 5 damage. The broad axe is 100 points. The pole axe is 95 points. I personally, I would go with more broad axes. And, and this is maybe where you're stealing those 5 points from your 65 point models instead of the
Sure.
70. You can spend it into the 100 point models instead of the 95 ones here. So,
Yeah.
this is where I'm using this. They've got that ability again, the mini rampage, and these guys are they're mean. I like them. I like them a lot.
Mhm. Um, I like them. I don't think I'd ever play more than two of them,
Okay.
because for 100 points, they only have 12 wounds, which at that
Mm-hmm.
point, I'm starting to get a little bit worried, especially when you have those buddies that are 65 points for 12
Yeah.
wounds with T5. But um, at
Yeah.
2-inch range, that can be nice because the bases on these smaller guys are really small bases. So you can actually put them base to base to where I'm pretty sure, unless I'm mistaken, the bulk type berserkers are on bases that are less than an inch wide. So if you put a Hearthguard berserker base to base behind one, your opponent
Mm,
cannot attack it with a 1-inch reach model without putting your Hearthguard within attacking range of them. And that's a nice little, I mean, you talked about this army like clumps, then all the clump
yeah.
abilities were really bad. Well, here's a clumping situation that's actually really good. So
Right.
for that reason, I really like having one or two in the list, but I wouldn't I wouldn't spam those Hearth guards because I just think 12 wounds at 100 points is a little bit dicey.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And we talked about the Auric Hearthguard, about like including one, like you need to be
Sure.
conscious about putting that into your list, right? Why are
Yeah.
you putting in that in there? You shouldn't be putting it in there for its attack profile necessarily.
Yeah,
You're doing it for the half net.
you're doing it because you spotted two missions out of the four in your tournament that you think it's going to be valuable, and you're
Mhm.
aware of certain specific guys in the meta, and you've pre-measured to make sure that 18 inches does what you want to do. But yeah, you could absolutely bring one.
So I put together a list, and I'm just going to run through it with you real quick. It's 995 points.
Okay.
Okay. It has a Hearthguard Berserker Carl. It has a Doomseeker, and it has a Volkite Berserker Carl. Okay, so I put 3 heroes in here.
Okay.
Uh, just this is me just messing around this morning. I've got 1, 2. I got 2, 3 Orc Hearthguard Berserkers. I have 1 Orc Hearthguard, and then I have 1, 2, 3 Volkite Berserkers with fire steel weapons and shield. So I only have 3. Now, in talking about this, I would probably drop another Berserker, right? The Hearthguard Berserker, and add some more and try to rework it and add some more of my 65 point model guys in there. But this is me messing around just to get as close to 1,000 points as I could. It's
Sure.
got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fighters in this, which is, I think, pretty good.
Yeah. I love that. Um, yeah, no, I think that's really solid. And it's fewer Fyreslayers, which is cool.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a not, yeah, I have a not so pure Fyreslayer list that I kind of like and want to share. I'd start with one of those Hearthguard Berserker Carls
Hmm.
for 140 points. Then you can get 7 of the 65-point Volkite Berserkers with the shields.
Okay.
And those 7 are 455 points, plus the 140 gets you to 595.
Yeah.
And then 100 gets you to um, 695, 100 for that Hearthguard Berserker with
Yeah.
Broadaxe. And then at that point, you've got 9 fighters and you still have 300 points, 305 points left. And I would spend that 305 points on a Italian king.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah.
And that would be my, yeah, that would be my plan. So 10 fighters with one of those fighters being an Achillean king, and then just really trying to spam people out with those 65-point toughness 5 guys.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised, to be honest with you, when I put the list together and I was like, wow, I can keep adding more. I can keep adding more. Just having
Yeah,
those 65-point models, like they start to add up really quick. Like I would not have thought that the Fyreslayers were a horde army, but they absolutely can be.
right, because they're supposed to be a little bit on the tougher side, and in AOS, they're not really a horde army or a elite army. They're really in
Right.
between. But
Yeah.
I do think, yeah, here in our Warcry world, they are a horde.
So we do have to just do a quick mention about the Bladeborn fighter, the Chosen Axis. You have
Yeah,
Fuel Grimnir, who is 200 points. He's got range 2, 3 attacks, 5 strength, 3, 6 damage. Like, I love the damage. I love the strength. I don't think for 200 points, I love him for 3 attacks.
I
You
wouldn't
know?
play him.
Yeah. And the fighters that they have, like, are not, like, they're not even up to par with the Hearthguard Berserkers. So I wouldn't
He's
play those either.
he's from back in the day when you couldn't really play move 3. Like he comes from Warcry
Yeah.
First Edition. That's when he got his points. And man, all of the move 3 fighters back then were just so bad.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll see what happens if there's ever a update to the tournament, Tome of Champions, and hopefully they get points updates. But I wouldn't even consider them to come in my Fyreslayer army,
Yeah.
as we did that. So awesome. That was a great review of the Fyreslayers, and having never played them, I'm kind of want to go get a little bit of Fyreslayers now, just to mess around with them. So it might be a
Yeah.
fun anti-meta army because nobody's ever seen them, So,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, well, let's get to our main topic. We don't have a ton of time left in the show, but I think there's a topic that has been rattling around in my brain a little bit. I get asked this all the time, especially as the Nova Open approaches. I get questions all the time about proxying models.
Sure.
I see it all the time on Facebook. I see it all the time in our Discord chats. Like, can I proxy this? What's the rules on proxying? And I think that this is born out of a lot of really strict rules, especially for 40K, where like 40K is like, oh, do you have a grenade on his belt? Then he can't throw grenades. You know what I mean? And you're like,
Sure.
oh, geez. Like, I mean, they're really strict about that. AOS is much less strict about that. And
Mhm.
so that's where I really cut my wargaming teeth was in Age of Sigmar. So proxying to me has already sort of been like a okay, yeah, I mean, if it makes sense, let's do it, right? But there's a lot of people out there that like they come from 40K and then migrated to Kill Team and then migrated to Warcry. And so the idea of proxying is really kind of a big deal, right? So what I wanted to do today is talk about sort of like the do's and don'ts of proxying and sort of the situations in which you should feel very comfortable proxying models and where you should maybe pay a little bit more attention in Warcry. And I think overall, what I want the takeaway to be is feel free to proxy, even in tournaments. but you just need to be
Yeah.
conscious about how you do it so that nobody has a negative play experience, right? So that's the takeaway that I think that we want everybody to sort of get from this. But let's start with narrative play, open play. You're in your garage with your buddies, having a couple of beers, proxying there, right? Like what? Like is that a no brainer there, Dan?
I think for the most part, that should be anything goes. But
Yeah,
man, like be courteous. Like I think really low effort proxies are a little rude. Like
yeah,
this can is the same base size as my Mega Boss. Do you see
right.
that?
Yeah,
Proxying this can for a Mega Boss kind of weak sauce, right?
yeah,
If someone was like, I really want to see if I should buy a Mega Boss, here, I'm going to use this beer can. I wouldn't stop them. I wouldn't say anything, but it's
right.
still a little rude. So just be aware that what you're
Yeah, totally.
doing, if you're if you're doing the lowest effort proxies in the world, just be aware that you are making your opponent's experience less cinematic, less enjoyable, and
Yeah.
just keep that in mind and be nice about it. But otherwise, most
Yeah.
reasonable proxies I would be fine with.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And there was one time that Jason and I wanted to try to play a monster, but I didn't have it built yet, but I had its base. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna put the base out there so that we can just at least move it around and see how it
Yeah,
goes. And like, of course, we were both okay with that because we had the goal of seeing how this would perform on the table, and it wasn't even like I hadn't even glued it together; it was still in the sprue, And so we played around with that. I do have some issues where it's like if we're playing a Warcry game and it's like, oh man, I need a 35 or a 32 mil fighter here, Stormcast fighter here. Let me put my Space Marine in the middle, and you're like, really,
yeah,
like really,
yeah.
like you said,
A
be not
non-Space
rude.
Marine model, okay, maybe. But if it's a Space Marine, get that shit
Out,
out of
it's
here.
gone. Yeah. So, but it's one of those things that it's like if you're playing Slaves of Darkness and you throw a Chaos Cultist from 40K on there, sure, okay.
Yeah,
They kind of look the same. I'll ignore the gun, like whatever. You know what I mean? Like not a big deal, but just I like you said, be courteous about it, right? Now for match play, tournament play, there's a couple of things. There's a couple of rules that I put out in the primer that I like to put out. One, um, if you're going to proxy something, make sure you check with the tournament because, for example, the AO Age of Sigmar tournament, they say that proxying is okay, but if you want to play on the televised tables, you cannot have any proxy models because it needs
sure.
to be official GW products on there. So go into the tournament understanding what the rules are, right, about proxying. I think that's the first step that you need to do. Second, I am fine with GW products, non-GW products, 3D printed products, like whatever you want to do in terms of proxying. But just make sure that it doesn't even have to accurately represent, that it somewhat represents, right? Like if it says that it's a broadsword fighter and it has two long swords, I don't think that that's like that big of a deal. Do you know what I mean? To be honest with you, like I don't care
Yeah,
about the weapon it has in its hand. There, if it says, the real thing that you have to pay attention to is the base size because that does matter, right? Like if you're like, oh, this is my 25 mil planes runner and he's on a 50 mil base, like that's a bit of an issue, because it can move a lot more or cover a lot more ground and stuff like that. So it does need to
yeah,
be on the correct base size. It does need to represent it. Like if it's like a Chaos Warrior, it shouldn't be looking like it shouldn't be looking like a snake figure. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe if you can justify it to me narratively, I'll probably still let it go. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? But just like just try to
yeah.
get it close. I guess is what I'm saying.
If it's non-WYSIWYG, but it's a similar size and it's on the exact same size base and it's themed to your army or
Yeah.
warband, I can't see an issue with it.
Right.
Something like, say, if you have a bloodthirster
Hmm.
and you want it to be your chimera because you're playing Corn, or you have a Lord
Yeah.
of Change that you want to be your chimera because you're playing Zine. I
Yeah.
would never stop that. Or like an Underworld's hero standing in for a foot hero of the same
Hmm.
faction, right?
Sure.
I'm always okay with that. The only complication there is if you've got an Underworld hero standing in for a regular fighter, I'm not really okay with you also having another Underworld's hero standing in for that specific Underworld's profile, right?
Yes.
Personally, I think all your Underworld's fighters should either be proxies or the real thing. But if you mix,
Yeah.
like, here we've got some Underworlds guys who are proxies, and here we've got some Underworlds guys who are their real selves, their unique selves. I think that's pretty rude. It asks your opponent to do all the mental tracking, which
Yeah.
I don't think is cool. I wouldn't be okay with that as a TO, but um, but using underworlds to proxy and they're on the same size base, always fine as long as that's the only thing that you're using them for.
So it's funny you say that because last year at the Nova Open, Bladeborn wasn't a thing. Remember 2.0 sort of got rid of it like right
Yeah,
there. And it wasn't until White Dwarf came out in like November that they said, oh, actually, it is a thing again, right? So, so I said, hey, no problem. If you want to proxy all the Underworlds models because they look cool and they're into your army, great, do it, please, because they're amazing models. Let's do it, right? This year, I took the stance of saying you cannot proxy a Bladeborn fighter
oh,
because,
interesting. Okay.
yeah, because there's just too much confusion potential there. I like what you said is like you either got to be all Bladeborn, that like they're represented Bladeborn, or they're all proxies for the other ones. But the fact of the matter is like if you take a little ghoul from some of those Bladeborn fighters, and you pop them into your army of um, why am I blanking on it? Your army there with other ghouls, then your Flesh Eater Court's army, then nobody's probably even going to notice, to be
Yeah,
honest with you, because they're so close anyway. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like that, like only a keen eye would really pick it up. And if they're like, "Hey, wait a minute," and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's just a normal ghoul," I think they'd be like, "Okay, no problem." You know what I mean? Like I agree. I think where you really start to get in trouble in Warcry is the heroes because they are very distinct
yeah,
and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, so I did say, look, you can't represent them all. I think where you also get in trouble is and this might work on your buddy's table but not in a tournament. If I wanted to take the blood sister, who is the sword snakes, and then I proxied it as a bow snake or whatever, that's a problem. Even though they're the
yeah,
same base, same model, really closely. I think you gotta pick one or the other. You can't have a proxy there. So that's just too similar, right? And the whole goal of all of this is to make sure that you're not creating confusion for your opponent, which when they're like, well, wait a minute, I thought that one shot because it has a bow in its hand and that's all it had. It didn't do
yeah,
melee like that. Um, that creates a negative play experience, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like what you said about the snakes makes a lot of sense. Or like here I've got Snurk Sour Tongue, right? And he could
Mm-hmm.
be the fanatic that has the spikes, but having him come in as the fanatic that has the big mushroom on a chain uh, would be a little bit sketchy if you've also got some spike guys or if you've also got, you know, other things. I think that could be pretty confusing. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you there that um, separate out your profiles so that it looks the most like the profile it is. it is standing in as. Um,
Hmm.
that Lord of Change being a chimera would be a lot less cool if you were running a chimera and a mutalist vortex beast, right?
Right.
Uh, um, Obviously you can't do that, but you know what I mean as far
Yeah.
as creating the confusion there.
Yeah. But and on the flip side, there's a lot of heroes in Age of Sigmar that make great proxies for uh, models in Warcry. I think, like for example, Radikar from the Cursed City
Sure.
box is a great vampire lord. You
Yep.
know, like great vampire lord, and nobody's going to confuse him with anything else because he doesn't have a Warcry profile. You know,
Right.
and
And
I think what is it, Brock Gunderson or something like that from
oh yeah,
KO? Yeah,
he
they're
can
like,
be
can I
any
use him
KO
as an
hero.
admiral? Yeah,
Yep.
they're like, can I use him as an admiral? Great, yeah, sure. You know what I mean?
You could
Because
use him as an admiral. You could use him as an aether chemist. I mean, as long
yep,
as you're not running an admiral and an aether chemist as well. But yeah, you could
yeah,
use him as like half of the KO foot heroes, and I think it would be totally fine.
yeah.
Um, Absolutely. What are your thoughts on 100% proxy warbands? So I'm thinking something like 40k Tyranids proxying for Flesh Eater Courts.
Mm,
Because, for example, what is the little, is it the Termagant or the Hormagant? But the
yeah,
melee little guy is on the same base as the ghoul. And
right.
then, they've got some kind of chunkier fighters that could stand in for, say, your crypt horrors. Uh, so like to me, if everything is um, if everything that's supposed to be melee is standing in for a melee guy and everything's on the same base, I would be okay with it personally. Like if you
Hmm.
had um, melee Tyranid warriors that are on the same base as crypt horrors, and then you had your Termagants that are standing in as ghouls, and then you had I don't even know the name of the guy who's on the same base as like, a big hero,
Yeah,
the Vargol court here, but you know what I mean.
yeah,
And
yep.
to me, that would be okay, but you just have to do a lot of work to make sure that everything is sort of representing something that's similar.
Yeah, I think that like if someone came up to me at Nova and said, I've got these Tyranids I want to play as Flesh Eater Courts, right? And I'm saying, okay. I would really posit that. You know what I mean? Because it is a tournament,
Sure.
I would really posit that. If I were playing in my buddy's garage, like totally, let's do this. You know what I mean? Um, and the reason I would pause a little bit is that like people playing Warcry may not know what a Termagant versus a Hormagant versus a flying, or what is it, the Von Leapers, Von
Yeah,
Johnson's
whatever
Leapers, or
they
something,
are.
Von Ryan's Leapers, right? Like they don't know like what those are necessarily, and so if you look at the list, it says ghoul, but then I'm looking at the models and I don't know. Okay, well, which one's the ghoul supposed to be? Like the person who is proxying really has to do a really, really good job of explaining the army before every match, right?
Yeah.
And explaining every activation almost. They have to say, okay, I'm activating this guy who's like a ghoul, right? And doing it so that they understand. And would that kind of pull you out of sort of the proxy narrative that you have playing in your mind? Like maybe a little bit, but you have to be that clear, I think, if you're going to use a fully proxied army in a tournament.
I think that's true. I think you need to be the one doing the work. You can't make
Yeah.
your opponent do the work. The reason I was thinking with Tyranids is because Flesh Eater courts just have such a huge like model size difference between the
Yeah.
big ones and the little ones. Um, but I could see something that would be a little bit tougher, like doing a Lord of the Rings force to be your cities of Sigmar, where everything's kind of close, but the Lord of the Rings like heroes that aren't in the Fellowship
Right.
don't really look that different from the regular people,
Yeah.
and the same is true in Cities of Sigmar. And so, like, that could be tough. I think you would need to do a lot of work to make that sort of read right. But some of those Lord of the Rings fighters are pretty similar in terms of their vibe to Cities of Sigmar. So
Yeah.
if you did put in the work, I think you could do it. The same with like Necrons being OCR Bone Reapers. Um,
Right.
it's tough because Necrons don't have a lot of melee guys. So you might not really be able to make that work, but
Yeah.
it's something I'd love to see.
But you may find a whole 3D printing line that is not like you may find a quote unquote cities line on
Yep,
3D printing that you would really have to say like, okay, these guys are my pistoliers, these guys are my Phoenix Guard, etc. And so that again, 3D printing is a great way to proxy, and I think
yep,
that cities, interesting that we talk about cities has a ton of models that you cannot find anymore. Like
right.
there's a profile for Lordling in there that was like the cheapest like hero fighter that could give you that swift as the wind, but that's you can't find that Lordling model anywhere. It was like gone in the 1980s or something like that.
Yeah, you
So
have to proxy.
you have to proxy that. And
Right.
putting Boromir in there instead of the Lordling, I think is a-okay. You know what I
Totally.
mean? Because it's like there's no other model for Boromir, but
And then at that point, you may as well have Gondorian Tower Guard as your halberdiers, right? Because
yeah,
I think that's what Gondor people use. So then it's like, yeah, then that kind of leads its way into kind of a full proxy force. Um,
yeah,
One thing that's cool about those 3D printed lines is a lot of them are specifically done to be WYSIWYG.
yeah,
And I think if it's WYSIWYG, I don't even think you should have to ask your TO. I think if it's WYSIWYG, it's just like no questions
sure.
asked. This is fine.
Yeah,
Like it's on
shield
the
and a
same page.
dagger or something like that, and it's for a
Yep.
clan rat, right? Shield and a dagger, and you've got a rat that has a shield and a dagger. Totally,
Right.
like you don't even need
Yep.
to ask. Yeah,
Mhm. Yep.
absolutely. So, and they do that a lot of those on purpose. Like I found a whole bunch of Kill Team 3D model stuff that was like, wow, these are exactly like the veteran guardsmen, and
Yeah.
down to the same weapons and everything, So, yeah.
Absolutely. Can you think of any other weird corner cases that have either tripped up proxiers that you've seen or kind of a theoretical situation that could be weird? What do you think?
So I think one thing that I have seen is using old models for that model.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
so like a bunch of Warcry players have come from Mordheim, or even like Warhammer Fantasy back in the day. So I think I saw one time a guy brought in an orc that was just so old school, and you're just like, what are we looking at here? Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
like, because we didn't know, but he's like, oh, that's the shaman, from the Cruel Boys that he's using. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine. He's got a little staff and he's got like a little weird hat on and stuff like that, and funny paint. And so you're like, okay, cool.
Yep.
So, using really old models, sometimes you have to be like, okay, what exactly are we looking at here? And as soon as they usually explain it, you're like, okay, I got it. Not a problem.
You
I
hope
think you
that
ha-
they've rebased them, right?
yes,
Like
and
if
they
your
should.
old model has a square base, that is a little awkward. I would never say anything in sort of our weekly casual games or in narrative play, but in a tournament, I would kind of look at that sideways a little bit. Um,
I would
but
if
yeah, if it's
someone
on the
brought
same
that to a
base,
tournament. If somebody brought that to a tournament, I would say go down to the vendor hall and go pick up a 25 mil base and put it like blue tack that on there. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Because like you like honestly, like the base does matter a lot, and
Mhm.
that is like more than anything. I think that you have to be careful sometimes about, and this sort of gets into like make sure you know what you're proxying. The difference between a champion, a long beard, a not a fire drake, a what is it? The long drakes?
Yep.
No, it is fire drakes.
I know
Um,
what you mean though. Yep.
like there's not a lot of difference between those models. Like some of them have shields and hammers, some of them just have big hammers, some of them have like like little cannon things. So if you're going to 3D print your models, you have to be very careful that like the thing that if you think you're printing out a champion doesn't have a shield. You know what I mean? And so there are times that
And in
it
some
does WYSIWYG
situations,
does matter, you
and
know?
in some situations, actually going and getting 3D prints, that's better
Yeah.
because some of those Cities of Sigmar guys, they look exactly the same despite having really different profiles. There's a ton of factions where the unit champ just looks like another one of the regular
Right.
fighters. Um, so it would actually be nice if you proxied your unit champ for a sweet 3D print,
Yeah.
um, just to make it be different, right?
Yeah,
Because
totally.
with the GW sculpts, it doesn't look any different. So there can be situations there where proxying actually makes it easier to explain everything to your opponent.
Yeah, and I mean, like the Bone Splitters is a great example, right? Making a more boy versus a more boy boss. The
Yeah,
difference is that I put a head on it that had a little feather on the top, like that
yeah,
was
and that's it.
or the the little like bands of hair or whatever it was. That was
Uh-huh.
literally the difference between those, right? And so
Yeah.
I had to sit down with my opponent and be like, okay, these guys with the little top knots, those are the bosses. Like these guys that look
Yep.
exactly like them, those are not the bosses.
Mhm.
So but yeah, so again, just kind of wrapping this up, feel free to proxying. I think is encouraged, especially if you really want to do something cool with your army and make it stand out. And some of these model lines haven't had a refresh since the 90s, and so like there's a lot of cool sculpts out there that you can get from either other product lines or 3D printing or something like that that really makes your army stand out and looks really cool. Like go for it, do it. Like just be cautious about when and how you're doing it, right? Like make sure
Yeah.
that they have the right base size, make sure that they're accurately representing what you need them to represent, and make sure that it doesn't create any extra confusion for your opponent that might create some negative play experience. And I think if you follow those rules, any TO in Warcry will be happy to work with you on your proxies, because you're being respectful for your opponent at that point.
And from a competitive perspective, in a larger tournament, anything with more than like 15, 16 players, it can be almost impossible to win Best Painted or get close to winning Best Painted without a proxy. It's
Mhm.
just what people vote for. People vote for proxies.
They love
And
those. Yep.
so, yep. And so, yeah, really consider it because if it's a tournament where best overall is a thing, then getting as many painting votes as you can really matters. And so
Hmm.
you can actually get to where going without a proxy is like massively hamstringing yourself. I personally try to not just vote for proxies, because I know a lot of people do, but um, yeah, you could definitely, it's a thing to think about if you're going to a larger tournament and you want to win it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. So, well, Dan, thank you so much for the conversation tonight. It's great to have you back.
Yeah,
Too much good stuff to talk about, and appreciate your insight as always. Everybody, if you want to learn more about Warcry, we want to get better at the game. Join us in our Discord. We have a lot of very talented players that are in there that are active that answer a lot of questions, and it's awesome when our tabletop and beyond crew rolls out to tournaments and they're like typically in the top percentages there, just because we do have some very talented players. So join us in our Discord, come listen to us, come learn if you're interested, and if you are one of those top players, come and teach us too, because we like to learn as well. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night, and of course we will see you at the tables. Good night, everybody.
yep. Good night.